So let's show how the for loop works through a code example. Let's create a static method and name it loop10 for loop. Let's create the structure of the for loop. So at the top of the for loop, we need to create 3 statements separated by colons. In the first statement, we declare the x integer variable and initialize it. In this case, we'll initialize its value to 0. The reason we are defining the x variable within the for loop structure is because the code of the x variable only needs to be local to the for loop. This means the x variable cannot be accessed outside the for loop. So the next statement to the right of the first statement in our for loop structure is an expression, which is akin to our while loop termination expression. So while this expression is true, the loop will not be terminated. Conversely, when this expression is false, the loop is terminated. The third statement in the for loop structure is an incrementation operation of the x variable. Okay, so let's write the code that we wish to repeat for each of the iterations of the for loop. This code will write the x value to the console screen. Let's run the code, and the result is as expected. Right, let's look at nested for loops. So a nested loop is a loop that is executed within another loop. Just as you are able to use any of the jump statements within any of the loops discussed in this tutorial, you can also create nested loops for any of the loops discussed in this tutorial. But let's look at nested loops through an example using for loops. Let's first define the number of iterations that we wish the code within the loops to repeat. We can do this with 2 constants. The first constant is named max parent loop count and will be used in the expression of our parent for loop. Let's set its value to 10. Let's then define a second constant. We'll name it max child loop count, also as an integer, and we'll set its value to 5. Okay, let's create the code for the for loop structure for the parent loop. In the first statement, we'll define a variable x with a scope local to the parent loop. This variable is our counter variable. The next statement is a Boolean expression that gets first evaluated when the loop is first encountered in code, and then each time an iteration of the loop completes. So this expression reads as, if x is less than the value stored in the max parent loop count constant, perform an iteration of the loop. The third statement performs an incrementation operation of the x variable. So with each iteration, the x variable is incremented by a value of 1. So the code within the loop will output the value of x. Notice that the console.write method is applied here instead of the console.writeLine method. This is because we want the subsequent output to be written on the same line as the x value. So we'll make sure the x value is followed by a space character and a colon for better readability. Let's implement the nested or child loop. The integer y is defined in the first statement of the loop, which makes the y variable's scope local only to this child loop. Effectively, this reads as perform another iteration of the loop if y is less than the value stored in the max child loop constant. And we'll use the console.write method once again because we want all values outputted within the loop to be written on the same line. So we write the y value followed by a space for better readability. And when the child loop is exited, we want the subsequent values of the following loop to be written to the next line. In order to achieve this, we simply write the console.writeLine method with empty brackets. And I've already inserted the nested for loop method in the main method, so we are now ready to test the code. So let's run the code. Great, the result is as expected. As you can see, for each iteration of the parent loop, the value of x is written to the console screen, followed by the values of y, which represent each iteration of the child loop. The process of this code is that for each parent iteration, the child loop iterates until the child loop is terminated. The process I've just described repeats until the parent loop terminates. So we can also decrement the for loop counter. Let's copy and paste our nested for loop code. Let's change the newly created method name to nested for loop child loop decrement. To demonstrate decrementing the for loop counter, let's apply the appropriate code to the child loop. So first we need to initialize the y counter variable to the value stored in the max child loop count constant. So we can change the expression to be y is greater than -1, which reads like this. The Boolean expression returns true and therefore executes another iteration of the loop until the value of y is 0. Then in the third statement, we simply change the plus plus to minus minus, which means we are counting down the value of y with each iteration of the loop. The starting value of y will be the value stored in the max child loop count constant. Okay, so let's call the method from our main method, and let's run the code. You can see the code is counting backwards from the value of 5 to 0 for our y value, for each iteration of the child loop. So because we include 0 as a value, the loop has actually executed one more time than we want. We want the child loop to execute 5 times and not 6 times. So let's alter the code slightly. So when we initialize y, let's initialize its value to max child loop count -1. And you'll often see this in loop expressions where there is a -1 added to the right of the maximum iteration constraint for a loop. The reason is that 0 is often used as the first index of a collection, for example an array. This means the amount of elements in the array is 1 greater than the highest index for the array. So let's run the code. So now you can see the value of y decrements from 4 to 0, which is a total of 5 iterations, which is the result we want. Please see the description below for details of where you can download the code from GitHub. If you feel you've gained value from viewing this tutorial, please consider giving it a thumbs up. It will be greatly appreciated. And please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please smash the bell icon to be notified of future content, which will be coming soon. Please feel free to engage with me via the comments section. Thank you.